This story begins in a dark operating room where two shady surgeons are conducting experiments on two living people who seem completely wounded. The surgeons inject both test subjects with a strange liquid green. Soon, the male subject begins to suffer, with blood pouring from all his orifices. Finally, whatever the surgeons injected into the poor man turns out to be too much for his body, and both test subjects supposedly die right there. One of the surgeons finally decides to give up on his research, realizing that after sacrificing so many people, the only thing that awaited them was one failure after another. He knows from the beginning that this research had no real future. Before leaving, he makes it clear that he will never be a part of it again. Du-Chin seems to be the only person who doesn't believe their efforts have been futile. According to him, the people they used for the tests were always supposed to die in 1 or 2 days. So it doesn't matter if they died a day earlier, as they contributed to the greater good of humanity. Chin then instructs his subordinate to leave the operating room, as he plans to take care of the bodies himself. The subordinate doesn't say another word and leaves in silence. Meanwhile, Chin remains convinced that this research will eventually succeed. He is sure that the only thing holding it back is the lack of suitable test subjects. He knows without a doubt that the right subject for this experiment is still out there. Now, let's move on to the main hero of this story. His name is Kan Yan, and his friend is Jin Minjong. These two work at a funeral home, taking care of corpses. After playing games and eating, they decide to go to the hospital to claim the bodies. When they arrive at the hospital, Yan shows his business card to the person in charge at the entrance and introduces himself as Kan Yan from Hual Funeral Services. He had received a call about some patients who passed away early that morning. His friend, Zhang, also joins them after taking a short break to go to the bathroom. Soon, they find themselves in the operating room, and the bodies they are there to claim are the same ones the surgeons were using for their experiments. Zhang confirms that the victims appear to be a father and his daughter. The report states they died in a traffic accident, but one thing doesn't make sense to Joan. While the father's body is in bad condition, the girl's body is almost intact. Aside from a wound on her arm, there are no signs that any surgeries were performed. His friend reminds him that they aren't forensic experts, so they should stop worrying about things that aren't their concern and focus on claiming the bodies. Joan decides to take a look inside the girl's mouth and, as he does, he suddenly cuts his finger on her broken tooth. At any rate, the next step is to move the bodies, starting with the father's. But as Joan begins to move the father's body, he suddenly notices the wound on the girl's hand has disappeared. Of course, this leaves him in shock. He points out the healed wound to his friend, but before they can discuss it further, Joan is hit by a stabbing pain that makes him collapse. His friend gets worried and rushes to his side to support him. Meanwhile, Joan's condition worsens rapidly. Suddenly, an immense and unbearable pain hits him, causing him to scream in agony. It seems some infection has entered his bloodstream through the cut on his finger from the girl's broken tooth. His heart feels like it's going to explode, and his entire body is so hot, it feels like he's being burned alive. He feels like he is dying if this pain continues. Finally, he loses consciousness, leaving his worried friend crying like a child. Meanwhile, the little girl begins to convulse and move. A while later, Joan opens his eyes without any idea of what is happening. He notices that the so-called dead girl is banging her head against the door. Naturally, Joan is frightened seeing the dead girl standing, and, as if that wasn't terrifying enough, he notices his friend's mangled and bloody body on the floor. Joan backs away in terror. Panic takes over his mind and his heart. For some reason, his hands are also covered in blood. Then, he notices the girl is staring at him, and they stare for a moment, but she simply turns and continues her creepy head-banging. After looking at his friend's dead body, Joan looks back at his blood-stained hands and the sweet scent of blood. Filling the room, it's strangely tempting. The overwhelming stench of blood fills his nostrils, spreading across his tongue. The scene before him feels twisted and surreal. Suddenly, Joan notices his supposedly dead friend is groaning. Seeing this, he makes a desperate effort to wake him up, but there's no response. His friend seems to be deeply unconscious. Joan decides to take him, believing he might survive if he gets him the treatment he needs. It seems the entire hospital is in ruins. There are bloodstains everywhere, and no one is in sight. Then, we see just an old man crying in the corner, while a little girl lies dead nearby. The old man's face shines with sweat from the tension consuming his mind. He's sure that no one will come to save them, which means the world outside this hospital is beyond saving. So, he curses whoever caused this madness. Suddenly, he notices the secretary twitching, so he starts running out of the room, sure that if he stays, he will die an unwanted death. Grabbing a golf club, he readies himself and ventures out of the room to get out of the hospital once and for all. We go back to the operating room. Joan has finished putting his friend on a gurney and is ready to take him for treatment, but Joan feels weak and sluggish. His stomach hurts as if his insides were twisting. The pain feels similar to the sensation of hunger. But this doesn't make sense. He had literally eaten before coming to the hospital, so it hasn't been long since his last meal. However, we all know the hunger he feels isn't for food. It's probably for blood. Anyway, he gathers his courage and starts pushing his friend's gurney. Upon opening the door and heading out, he runs into the scared old man holding a golf club. The old man is a blessing for Joan. Quickly, he yells for help, asking the doctor to attend to his injured friend. Just then, the zombie girl who was banging her head rushes past Joan and runs straight for the old man, like a hungry, bloodthirsty monster. As the old man recoils in fear, more zombies burst out of another room and begin to devour him. Joan does nothing but tremble as he stands there, witnessing this horrendous scene. His friend, whom he was trying to rescue, gets up by himself, walking towards the other zombies who are devouring the old man with glee. When he reaches them, he sinks one of his teeth into the old man's head, joining the macabre feast. Joan doesn't waste a second and hides behind the wall. He reflects on how his friend, once so goofy, has now become this brainless zombie. For a moment, Joan thinks he must be dreaming, because what is happening can't be real. He closes his eyes and concentrates, trying to wake up from this nightmare. But he's out of luck because, indeed, it is not a dream. Then, he notices that it's April 29th, even though it's supposed to be the 24th. If he's understanding correctly, he lost consciousness for 5 whole days. Quickly, he grabs his phone and confirms that it is, indeed, April 29th. His phone is full of missed calls and unread text messages from his sister, Nuna. In the messages, she expresses concern for his well-being and pleads with him not to go outside, begging him to stay alive. Shortly after, his phone dies. While Joan has no idea what's going on, that's no excuse for him to just stand there and do nothing. If he wants to save Nuna and Minnie, he must get out of the hospital at all costs. In a random convenience store, we see a girl crying in a quiet corner of the store. The area outside is infested with mindless zombies, hungry for blood, so the only thing she can do is pray for a savior to arrive. We return to Joan, who runs through the hospital hallway and then down the stairs. As he descends, he comes across the little zombie girl banging her head, but he finally makes it down and out of the hospital building. He's exhausted, and hunger is finally overwhelming him. Although he has no time to stop for food, he can't help it, because after being unconscious for several days, it's natural for him to feel hungry. He is so hungry he could collapse, so he decides to find food first. As he scans the area, he sees a convenience store and, without a second thought, he enters the abandoned store. He starts devouring burgers and sodas as if there's no tomorrow. After finishing, he feels satisfied once he's done eating, only to realize that something about himself seems strange. It's odd that he didn't even stop to consider if the food he was eating was spoiled. Also, he usually hated convenience store food, so it's unusual that he's eating it. Suddenly, his eyes fill with tears as he remembers his friend, who has now literally become a zombie. He recalls how his friend had always been curious about the existence of zombies, but now the poor guy has become one. While John chokes on the sadness of losing his friend, he suddenly hears a commotion coming from a nearby storage room. He cautiously approaches the room and carefully enters. He sees the same girl we have seen in previous scenes. She screams loudly, thinking a zombie is approaching her. Completely overwhelmed by fear and panic, she finally dares to look back, only to find John forcing a smile as he offers to help her. Meanwhile, a zombie outside the store is approaching the convenience store. Inside, John picks up some edible items and offers them to the hungry girl, who devours the food as if there is no tomorrow. Seeing how fast she is eating, John suggests she slow down, warning her that it might upset her stomach. The girl, finally feeling satisfied after eating and drinking some water, thanks him and says she feels much better. Out of pure curiosity, she asks how he managed to get in, which surprises him. He explains that he was so hungry he thought he needed to eat something, so he ran to the convenience store. Of course, his explanation doesn't seem very convincing, especially considering how the outside is full of mindless zombies. Suddenly, John asks if she can find something to charge his phone. She reminds him about some power banks in the store. John decides to go look for them and continue on his way, but the girl begs him not to open the door because there are zombies outside. Yet John assures her there were no zombies when he entered. But just as he opens the door, as if summoned by fate, a zombie appears outside. Tan pronto how our boy opens the door, and as soon as the zombie sees the human girl, it goes berserk and starts to run towards her at full speed. However, since Joan is standing between them, he pushes the monster away from her. Unintentionally, he pushes it so hard that the zombie flies through the air like a light garbage bag and slides across the floor. What Joan thought was a simple push turned out to be a deadly counterblow. The girl behind him is left shocked by such power, while Joan is also equally bewildered, having no idea where all that strength came from. The zombie that took the brunt of the blow is out for the count, and as the scene zooms out, we realize just how powerful and bizarre that push was. The zombie literally went through a glass window and was thrown about 4.5 meters away. Joan claims that he definitely pushed the zombie with all his strength, but he didn't expect to knock it down like that. It's then that he notices another curious detail. During his entire time running around, there hasn't been a single zombie that has tried to attack him. The girl then asks him about the secret behind his immense strength. Funnily enough, she calls him a jushi, a term in Korean used to address middle-aged men, something Joan is definitely not a fan of. He doesn't want to be thought of as a creepy, middle-aged man. Anyway, he remembers that he was supposed to grab a power bank, so he heads to the general goods section. Later, after charging his phone, he calls his sister Nuna but gets no response, which fills him with an immense dread. He doesn't want to entertain the possibility that he might be too late to save her. Now, the image of Mini Nuna appears before his eyes and he feels tears welling up, but he suddenly snaps out of those gloomy thoughts, as he can't be sure of anything. It's still possible her phone just ran out of battery and that she's hiding somewhere, waiting for help to arrive. So, once again, he gathers his courage and decides to venture outside to find them. But before he can leave, he needs to sort something out with the girl from the convenience store. He asks her if she has a phone. She replies that she does, but it's out of battery. Joan quickly offers her a power bank and suggests she call her parents. A short while later, she manages to get in touch with her mother, and tears fill her eyes as she speaks. She quickly reassures her mother about her well-being and her current whereabouts. Her mother, relieved, is glad to know that she is alive. The daughter also makes sure to credit her well-being to the efforts of this ajushi who helped her once again. Joan gets annoyed at being considered a creepy middle-aged man, since he's only 28 years old. He finds it unfair that they call him that. Suddenly, the girl's mother warns her not to return home and, with that, she hangs up the call, leaving the poor daughter worried, crying, and filled with sadness. After the call, the girl continues to cry and sob uncontrollably. Seeing how desperate and helpless she is, Joan decides to help her. He suggests she accompany him and that he will help her get to her house. Suddenly, his attention is drawn by the commotion outside. It seems that more and more zombies have gathered inside the store. Seeing this, the girl begins to cower even more, realizing that she has no chance of escaping. Joan recognizes that they won't be able to leave unless he takes care of the threat outside. He rummages through the store's supplies and creates a temporary weapon to defend himself and attack. Before leaving the warehouse, he gives her a firm warning. Do not open the door under any circumstances and assures her that he will be back soon. With that, he leaves, leaving the girl begging him not to go, but he closes the door in her face and goes to face the zombies outside. After eliminating the threat, Joan returns and assures her that everything is under control. Seeing him standing there, confidently, makes the girl's face light up with immense awe. To be sure, she asks him if he is okay. He confirms that he is, although before, he wasn't sure. After fighting those zombies, he is quite sure that he is in good shape. The most important thing is that he points out that the zombies don't seem to attack him to devour him. Later, Joan enters a clothing store and chooses some clothes for himself. After changing, he finally leaves the store. As if luck were on his side, he sees a heavy motorcycle parked on the other side of the street. The beauty of the motorcycle seems to look at him, almost as if it were inviting her for a ride later. When they return to the convenience store, they find the girl also changing into the clothes he bought for her. Joan apologizes to her, saying he doesn't know much about women's clothes, so he just picked what he thought might work. Since there aren't many zombies nearby, he decides to gather some food supplies before they leave. While they're browsing the aisles, Joan finds a baseball bat and takes it for himself. The girl expresses her concern about how he's risking his life just to keep her safe. They are complete strangers, and she doesn't understand why he's helping her. She also assumes that, being a Nauchi, he must have a family he wants to protect first. Joan really doesn't like being called a Nauchi again. He makes a creepy face. Secondly, he reassures her that she shouldn't feel guilty. It's natural for someone to be in desperate need of help, and he's sure that one day he'll need help too. Above all, since the zombies don't bite him, there's no real threat to his life. The moon shines brightly, casting a quiet light on the zombies wandering carelessly below it, but its tranquility is soon shattered by the deafening roar of a 700cc engine. The one behind the handlebars is, of course, Joan, riding the new beauty. Even though he's making quite a bit of noise, the zombies don't react immediately, probably because his presence is overshadowing the girl sitting behind him. With no obstacles in his way, he hopes to get to Nuna as soon as possible and rescue her from this mess. We cut to a gas station where, inside a grocery store, a man is hiding from the zombies. The bottle he's holding is his last source of water, and he knows that his doom is near. He curses his bad luck for getting trapped in this store that has already been completely looted. Suddenly, the sound of a motorcycle catches his attention. This makes him believe there are survivors in the area. The worst part is, the sound is getting closer and closer. Eventually, the sound stops right outside the grocery store at the gas station. Seeing the motorcyclist casually stop in the middle of the infested monsters, the man inside the grocery store starts to lose his mind. It might not be a great idea, but he decides to risk his life and call out to them. However, his fears are unfounded because Joan is already taking down the mindless zombies, one by one, with a single blow each time, knocking every monster out of commission. As Joan takes down the zombies, the man in the grocery store can barely believe his eyes. Suddenly, a zombie approaches Joan from behind, so the man in the grocery store shouts a warning to her. All Joan does is take 2 steps back, and the zombie flies past her, as if Joan wasn't even there. This leaves the man in the grocery store in complete disbelief. Meanwhile, as the zombie is about to reach the girl behind the motorcycle, our guy swings his bat so hard that the zombie flies through the air like a trash bag. With the area clear, Joan tells the girl to stay calm. As for the man trapped in the grocery store, he still can't do anything but stare in awe at Joan. If his eyes aren't deceiving him, what he saw clearly proves that the zombies didn't even try to bite Joan at all. Then, Joan proceeds to walk toward the fuel pump to fill up the motorcycle, as the road ahead will be long. But the pair gets startled when the middle-aged man finally emerges from the grocery store, excited. With a bubbling joy inside him, he's absolutely certain that the person in front of him is an exclusive scoop, a term that goes completely over Joan's head as she drinks some water. As if he's never had anything better in his life, the man remarks that he's glad he was able to quench his thirst. Curious, Joan asks him how long he has been hiding in there. It turns out it's only been 3 days, although the guy didn't expect the convenience store to be completely looted and empty. Without any resources, however, he feels a little hopeful now that he has met his saviors in the apocalypse. In an effort to improve their relationship, he introduces himself as King W, a 32-year-old journalist who no longer cares about his job because his world is gone to waste. The girl, Park Hina, is a 20-year-old university student. Finally, there's our guy Johan, who seems to be 28 years old. He's a bit hesitant to explain that he's a mortician or, well, used to be. Woon comments that he doesn't look like one at all, while for some reason Hina is staring at him. A detail that makes him wonder, since in reality the girl is just surprised that this guy didn't turn out to be some old boomer dude. Woon learns about how the two of them met. It was really just a chain of events that brought them together through the convenience store. Well, Johan admits that it's a bit weird that they haven't even exchanged names up to this point. Anyway, Hina understands that they both went through some real horror being trapped there, something he's willing to talk about later. For now, he's actually quite curious about something that's been bothering him. Woon directly asks him about the strange ability Johan has that makes him immune or invisible to zombies. Outside, the hordes of the undead are growling and looking for fresh blood. Getting back to their conversation, Johan tells his story of how he was knocked out for 5 days inside the morgue and only found out about the apocalypse after waking up. What he remembers most is getting sick before he passed out. The journalist is taking note of these details, confirming Johan's story, that he escaped the hospital and then found Hina. Soon after, Woon also confirms that Hina was looking for her family in the midst of these events. Now, it seems that neither of them really knows what happened, something Woon considers a blessing. Mortified, Hina asks why, and he ends up explaining that the entire planet was reduced to zombie land within that timeline, so they can only imagine the worst. To expand on the details, the first 2 days were the definition of a literal slaughterhouse. Normal people were quickly turned into flesh-eating zombies, and most of them died without even having a chance to know what was happening in the world. The really scary part is that they were hunted down by their closest loved ones, not knowing what had happened to their dear companions. With the way he's describing the details, Hina is crying, her eyes filled with tears. The journalist apologizes for being so graphic in his details and emphasizes that Hina's family must be okay thanks to the call's confirmation. He assures her that they will meet again, a fact Hina confirms, though her words are filled with doubt. Deciding to intervene in the conversation, Joan is curious about the journalist's story. Of course, W also shares that being a journalist doesn't matter much to him right now. He was actually working on a case to find the cause of this apocalypse, and taking that risk led to him being stranded, as he ran out of gas and ended up trapped. Invested in learning the truth about the zombie apocalypse, Joan asks about his findings. The journalist argues that it's not that important, and his attention shifts to a more pertinent matter. The moment he turns to his left, he is terrified to see a group of zombies attacking the window. The scene terrifies the whole group, especially since they can't even leave the gas station before becoming meat for this zombie horde. Joan believes they should step on it and get out of there as soon as possible. Since they can't use the motorcycle in this instance, he asks for the location of W's car, which is parked on the road, just a few minutes away. Of course, their only chance to get to the car is if they get past these ghouls first. Arming himself with a club, Joan decides to play the hero for them, declaring that they will clear the door for him. It seems like a reckless idea to the journalist, especially since this guy is going to risk his own life just to get out of there. Joan promises he'll be fine, especially since he doesn't have any zombies to worry about, as none of them try to bite him. Turning to face Hina with a soft, reassuring smile, he promises to take her home just as he said. Taking a deep breath, our boy enters a 1 versus 50 battle. Before he leaves, Hina musters the confidence to tell him he should just call her by her first name, since their age difference isn't that big. Hearing that, our boy smiles, uttering her name as he prepares to face the threat. The funny thing is, Go is acting like a third wheel in the middle of a couple problem. Anyway, the gruesome freaks outside weren't expecting it, but a human actually made a superhero entrance to take them all on. With a determined look, Johan declares that he won't let a single one of them inside. The horde of zombies screams as one human tears them apart with his strength. He turns to one walking right beside him, and I don't know if Johan held some personal grudge against this guy or something, but this dude really got slammed against the wall. He makes an interesting observation here. It's not just the fact that the zombies don't try to attack him, but in fact, it's as if they don't even acknowledge his presence. As he tries to understand the process of why this is, Johan isn't concerned. For now, all that matters to him is staying firm in his goal of keeping them from getting in. Watching the scene from the window, W is on high alert and can't believe his eyes. He makes the same observation as Johan, but then there's also the terrifying increase in strength he's gained out of nowhere. The way he's destroying zombies by slamming them drains his stamina quite a bit, making him feel hungry. Even though he'd eaten recently, the feeling is similar to not having eaten in days, which weakens his body and drains his resources. As he punches zombies left and right, Johan concludes that he'd probably feel much better after finishing off the horde and having a meal. Meanwhile, the sight of Hina, struck by an incomprehensible terror, brings Johan to his knees. It confuses Bo and worries Gina, because this guy is basically sitting breathless amidst the horde of the undead, walking right past him. He doesn't know what just happened or why. He can only think of Hina at that moment. Here comes the shocking twist. Johan is experiencing a severe temptation to eat a human being. He's no different from the zombies in that regard, which actually makes some sense, as it's almost as if the zombies don't recognize his presence. Anyway, Hina is really worried and wants to help him, but Bo sensibly tells her it's reckless to do that. As they argue, Johan regains his footing and continues exterminating the undead horde, striking down so many of them. How he can end his attack, smashing a zombie's face into the ground. Unfortunately, at the end of his intense attacks, he's left panting and terrified. This is bad, and he knows it. Even W can notice it from afar. The protagonist, confused, worried, and conflicted, tries to reassure himself in his sea of doubts, believing that he's different from the zombies, that he's human, right? Or so he wants to believe. His eyes glow with a red spirit. Johan declares that he'll never stoop so low as to become a monster like them. Well, it's a good thing his temptations vanished after drinking some water. Johan drank a ton, but it makes sense given how many zombies he took down by himself. Gina is worried that he might be hurt, but he actually suffered no physical damage from the fight. Of course, the journalist thinks that fighting so many of them, and actually killing them, is no easy feat. Still bothered by the extreme hunger he experienced, Johan's temptation is replaced by a gut-wrenching pain in his stomach. Deciding to focus on moving forward, Johan recommends using W's car as their safest escape route. Of course, they can easily find a can of gasoline nearby and properly refuel the vehicle. Johan suggests moving together because going alone is dangerous. Bombarded with a new level of panic, a guy appears out of nowhere screaming and asking for help. Wasn't he torn to shreds by the zombie horde earlier? Johan notes that this guy seems legit, evident from his cry for help. The problem is that his friend is seriously injured and on the verge of death, but this situation is a bit complicated, as you wouldn't always trust someone in the middle of an apocalypse. Johan calculates his options, while W recommends they stay on guard because these guys could still be dangerous. Gina argues with this idea, believing they should help others who need it. In any case, Johan agrees with her approach, no matter how naive it is. W gives in and agrees to do it if they're on board. So, Gina unlocks the gate and welcomes these guys, who are very grateful for them taking a risk on them. But, unbeknownst to them, these guys are actually scumbags and have just gotten a free pass inside. Gina gives them some water to revitalize them and asks for an update on their situation. Of course, W is immediately skeptical and asks if their friend was bitten by a zombie. In response, the chubbier guy starts to panic and shows them that there are no visible wounds. Another one of them thinks his friend should have already turned into a zombie if that were the case. Regardless, the journalist is still doubtful and asks about their strategy for survival. It turns out these guys have nothing to go on and were basically trying to find help for their friend. W remains distant in his stance, but his attitude makes Heine explode. She thinks he should focus on helping these guys while they're in danger, especially since it's thanks to Joan's consideration that they're still alive. The guy who's sweating buckets thanks them for their generosity. W admits that maybe he was too harsh in his approach, while Joan turns to him and asks if the car is an SUV. This means that the 5 of them can travel without any problems. But of course, Joan has other plans because he wants to look for a motorcycle on his own. This is because he wants to lead the group, scouting ahead for safer places. It's a wise strategy, since they can't stay in one place forever. The journalist agrees with the idea and they decide to get the car as soon as possible. Heine promises to take care of the injured guy while they're busy retrieving the car. W tells her they'll be back soon, so she has nothing to worry about. Of course, that's how they both leave. But unbeknownst to them, these guys were hatching a plan all along. The scene cuts to Joan and W arriving at the car's location. He refuels the vehicle, but Joan is curious as to why the journalist is so against the 3 new guys. Well, he explains that his gut feeling is telling him not to trust these strangers, and just because of the sheer horror he's experienced in the last few days, he has been wary of others, as he has a cynical view of people. Joan is intrigued and asks him why the journalist trusted them from the beginning. Well, it's because he was already going crazy from dehydration and needed to find a way to survive. Joan is also curious about why he was referred to as a scoop when they met, which basically means the journalist got lucky finding a guy who's literally immune to the zombie apocalypse. In response, Joan's stomach lets out a roar so loud it shakes the heavens. He blushes, but it's only logical for him to feel so drained after fighting zombies. W thinks they should focus on finding food after getting the car, but something's wrong. A strange feeling washes over our protagonist as he simply turns around, frozen in place. He's heard something, and it's not zombies this time. Joan is sure he could hear Gina's voice. And now, let's go back to the gas station, where a girl is screaming to be let go. Gina has been captured by these guys, who blackmail her by saying she'll only attract zombies with her crying. This makes her freeze up even more as they press the barrel of a gun to her head. The disgusting guy, who must be sick, reveals his true nature, thrilled to have them right where he wanted them. They fell for his stupid trick, and he no longer wants to keep up the charade. He and his group plan to shoot Joan and W as soon as they return. As for her, she'll serve as their perfect hostage for the situation. Gina gets pissed off and bites his damn finger, making the clown scream in pain. He slaps her across the face and continues to mercilessly beat her with his gun. Even though he knocks her unconscious, he's still furious from the throbbing pain. Even his friend thinks it's funny that this guy ended up being bitten by a human instead of a zombie. Anyway, he's tired of playing around and wants the chubbier friend to stay outside on guard. This fool just wants to do whatever he wants. He plans to take her with them after eliminating her 2 friends. And just as this guy is about to get his revenge, an angry Joan appears and blows his head off, sending him flying. Like a ghost, he appeared out of nowhere, and seeing Gina's pitiful state, rage is the only thing on his mind. W also arrives, worried about her condition, and tries to help her. He was right not to trust those fools from the start. Joan tells the journalist to get her in the car. Meanwhile, this man is eager to leave a pile of bodies behind. So he'll stay here for a while. The reporter leads her to the car, glad that he wasn't attacked by zombies in the process. He turns to her, and Gina clearly looks injured. It wasn't any different from what he suspected when he first saw those guys. W thinks it's a good way to teach both Gina and Joan a lesson, warning them not to trust anyone from the very beginning. But now she's safe, because even W knows they have a top-tier protector. Speaking of our guy, let's focus on the fight. This guy shoots these clowns, a hateful glare. They just hurt his girl, and he's not going to let this slide. In response, both guys pull out their own weapons, one with a club and the other with a crowbar, talking trash to our guy for overestimating his abilities. Joan doesn't say a word and, surprisingly, drops his metal bat, confusing them both. At first, They think he got scared and doesn't want to fight, but the chubby guy already caught on and tells W not to rush in because something is clearly wrong with this guy. Veins bulge on his face, his angry expression twists into a sinister madness, and his thoughts are jumbled. But worst of all, he's hungry. He's hungry to devour real human flesh, and his sanity is on the brink of destruction. Well, the real massacre happens when he starts to pounce on Gun's corpse after taking him out, enjoying every bite as he chews on his flesh. Then he turns to the others, approaching the guy who hurt Gina and took advantage of her trust. The guy is terrified upon seeing Yuan, as the way he's acting now is terrifying. We get a really scary shot of our guy staring him down, as if he's about to eat some KFC right then and there. The guy waves his small gun in response, but in the end, Yuan destroys him and consumes his flesh. After that, he quickly wipes the blood away. W heard the gunshot and jumped out of the car, scared. But to his astonishment, only one man walked out of the gas station alive, and it was Yuan. Worried, he asks if he's okay, but in response, Yuan asks about Gina's condition, who seems to be sleeping soundly. It's comforting to hear that. But W wonders why he changed his clothes. Joan hands him the gun he recovered from the clowns. It's something very useful in this damn apocalypse. So the journalist is happy. Besides, he's more than willing to trust in the intuition of Joan from now on, showing that he's adapting to his mistakes, unlike a bunch of protagonists with their naive optimism. Worried, the journalist asks him if he's really okay, or if something happened, pretending everything is normal. Joan flashes a smile, hiding his pain while checking the bike. Finally, it's time to get out of there. After all, W doesn't know what the hell happened inside, but he decides not to think too much about it. It's time for the group to leave, so they depart. During the ride, Hina wakes up only to be surprised to find herself in a car with the journalist. She doesn't know what happened, but W promises that they took care of that manipulative fool who tried to take advantage of her trust. Also, Joan is determined not to leave her side and plans to be more protective of her. Hearing that, Hina cries, holding her face in tears, which makes W worry that she might have been hurt somewhere. She wonders why those people, the same people they tried to help, took advantage of them. They had good intentions, and yet, instead of trying to survive together, those guys instilled a permanent sense of despair in her heart, causing trust issues with anyone she's going to meet now. It's not a good feeling, and W understands it, but he gives her the words she needs to hear. On the bright side, he wants her to trust Joan completely, even if she doesn't trust anyone else, since he is more than willing to protect her, no matter what. Let me pause for a moment to break down the meaning of the scene where Joan gave the gun to the journalist. In fact, it's because he doesn't trust himself and wants W to control him in case he loses control. Okay, getting back to the story. Joan and his group clear the area inside a building, taking every one of the zombies out of commission. Our boy wants to take his friends to the room he saw, but his eyes lock onto a frame with a picture of a loving family. He almost forgets that these zombies were once. W is reasonable and apologizes for killing the father. Anyway, he secures 2 rooms for their group. They don't have much to worry about anymore, but he's confused as to why the reporter wanted them to stay for the night, especially now that they have a getaway vehicle. It's because W wanted them to rest from the whole exhausting experience, since traveling by day would be safer. To top it off, it's essential that Gina gets all the rest she needs. Worried, Joan asks if she'll be okay. It doesn't look good, because she's sustained a severe mental scar from this experience, hindering her ability to trust anyone. It's a hopeless feeling, and it's truly sad how some traumatic experiences can corrupt a person's view of the world for the rest of their life. But the reporter argues that Joan needs to play his part here, since, given that she doesn't trust anyone else, she'll only trust someone like him, the man who saved and protected her time and again. Joan really doesn't want to be put in that role and expresses that it's literally their first day together, but the reporter argues they've been through a lot of carnage for a single day, which is also true. Anyway, the second reason he wanted to find a place to rest is for Joan himself. As a reporter, he wanted to ask him a bunch of questions. The first question is why the zombies don't perceive his presence. Of course, our guy doesn't know the answer to that question, but he firmly believes they don't recognize him at all. The reporter enters a contemplative state, wondering what kind of explanation could help describe the cause, since it's their first day together and they don't know much. But W wants him to keep him updated in case Joan discovers anything new about his condition. The next question is whether our guy has ever practiced sports or martial arts before. The question seems odd to Joan, who denies ever doing such a thing, because that's what really surprised the reporter, his monstrous strength, as he casually lifted zombies and smashed them against walls and pavement as if they were nothing. The reporter declares that it's almost as if he isn't even human, a phrase that makes Joan cower in fear. Wu understands that even Joan is puzzled about his condition. To move away from the serious topic, the reporter apologizes for asking the boy so much right after he saved his life. Besides, Joan's quest to find his sister remains unresolved. He wants to go to her place to check on her, as his sister lives in Yanyan, and that place is quite far from here. There's no way to know if they can get transportation, but despite the hardships and obstacles, Joan wants to do everything he can to save his sister. The reporter strongly opposes the idea, because the place is too far, and there is no need for him to be so reckless. Joan doesn't understand why either, though he feels it's the right thing to do no matter what it costs. Hearing those words, Hina seems to wake up with tear-filled eyes, moved by Joan's honesty. Wu thinks the boy is a little too kind, and it makes sense why Hina trusts him unconditionally as she writes her thoughts on paper. Wu wants to conclude the conversation with a question. He wants to know if Joan has noted any specific patterns about the zombies, any kind of information that might help them in the long run. Scratching his head, Joan replies that he doesn't know anything significant. He believes their senses are still intact, but that theory is also inconsistent because it doesn't make sense, as the zombies can distinguish between humans and one of their own. Surprising them with her input, Hina drops a bombshell. The zombies are actually attracted to exposed skin, according to her manager, who hid in the storage room before being attacked. Wu worries that she has woken up early, but Hina sits up after not being able to sleep for a while. She also apologizes to our boy for worrying him unnecessarily, assuring him that she's better now. Anyway, Wu is curious about her words and asks for more details. Hina explains that the zombies are attracted to exposed skin, which is why she also asked for long pants at the store. The confused reporter is even more perplexed than before, realizing they have a lot of work to do. In any case, they'd better find some gloves to cover more of their skin now. Actually, he ends up finding a working radio nearby. The radio broadcast mentions the 6th day of the virus outbreak, commenting on how life is still being threatened by the apocalypse. Hina can't believe that the radio is actually working right now. The broadcast is live, reporting on the 5 days of the apocalypse. Joan and Won are surprised to see the channel is still running, which means the station must be safe, but Joan thinks they might be trapped inside the station. This might seem more like a distress signal rather than an actual broadcast. Well, Hina knows the station is nearby, so Go recommends leaving it up to Joan, who should make the final decision. After all, he is the only one among them capable of navigating inside the station. Still, Joan firmly believes that finding Hina's parents is a priority and is willing to reconsider his options after that. Seeing him stand up for her so many times, Hina feels relieved. The journalist is on board with that idea and suggests everyone get some rest. In the next scene, we have a dream sequence where our boy is running away from zombies, terrified. They are slowly closing in, and in the end, the only thing he can do is brace himself for the coming pain. Joan wakes up and sees Han's body appear before his eyes, which is clearly shocking because he's not supposed to be alive. This makes him wonder if the whole zombie apocalypse was a dream all along. But then, our boy's life turns into a nightmare, as a horde of zombies savors human flesh, giving him more nightmares to deal with. Hinman invites his friend to go with them and eat, since he's supposed to like human flesh, and his face looks like something out of a horror movie. Joan finally wakes up, breathing heavily, and his eyes are filled with terror. The daylight touches the edge of his bed, and peace finally sets in. His hands are still shaking from the experience as he gathers his thoughts, reassuring himself. A couple is resting in their bed, having recently run out of food. Instead of worrying about their own health, they are even more concerned about their daughter, Gina. They hope she was rescued by a trustworthy person. The poor mother just wants to see her daughter one more time, and they embrace their fate since there's nothing they can do. Suddenly, Hina's father is drawn by a sound that wakes him up. He heard a motorcycle, which suggests the presence of a survivor. To his surprise, the bike stopped near them, but zombies are all around, which makes this decision seem reckless to Hina's parents, as they know nothing about the special powers of Joan. He has safely arrived at the exact spot Hina described, but so far there are no signs of human life. He considers neutralizing the horde before continuing the search, so our boy uses his trusty metal bat to smash one of them. The scene leaves Hina's parents speechless, watching a single man destroy zombies without any trouble. This makes them wonder what kind of person he is. With the path cleared, Joan looks around and realizes why W's car couldn't get this deep into the city without having cleared it first. Now he wants to explore his surroundings to investigate more. Joan ends up walking in the direction of their house, jumping the wall. They're afraid to come out and trust a complete stranger, until suddenly Joan addresses them and asks if they are Hina's parents. They both rush to greet him upon hearing their daughter's name, so excited that they even startle Joan for a second. We fast forward to when Hina finally gets the chance to hug her parents. The family has a happy reunion, and seeing them together, Joan's face lights up, relieved to have fulfilled his promise. Unfortunately, W has to remind them to do this inside, as it's still not safe outside. Hina's father shakes his hand, thanking him deeply for taking care of his daughter. Of course, the journalist doesn't want to take credit and tells them that it was all thanks to Joan. They finally go inside, and Hina's parents explain how they got lucky and managed to create multiple barricades against the zombies to ensure their survival. Unfortunately, being trapped inside, they ran out of resources and did everything they could to look for their daughter. Fortunately, they now have her back, so they are extremely grateful to the two men who helped her. But Bo explains that it was all thanks to Joan, who has been taking care of everything for them. Joan learns that they didn't go out for 6 days. The power went out, but luckily the water was still working fine, and that's how they survived. Well, there was no food left, so they were practically starving. Joan realizes he has to do something about their situation, and remembers passing by a supermarket on the way. The shutters were down, which means the supermarket probably has a lot of resources inside, making it a good place to stock up on supplies. He has to ensure their survival, so he's going out, but Hina's father is against the idea, as he would be risking his life for them. Still, Joan believes they can't survive without basic resources. Besides, they haven't eaten anything in 2 days, and he can't just overlook that. Agreeing with the idea, W chimes in, saying they should prioritize survival, as anything could happen with the way things are going. Hina's father musters up the courage to help our boy, but of course, Joan doesn't want to risk something like that, so he refuses and tells him to focus on Hina's condition first. Hearing this, Hina's father becomes a mess. There's nothing more touching than a man worried about his family. Well then, Joan leaves. W intends to go with him to manage the food. Following Hina's theory, he's completely covered and wants to help Joan, being useful instead of being a burden. That's a good thing for the protagonist, who has a reliable ally to work with. They say goodbye to the family and ride off on their motorcycle. Sure, Hina's family is worried, but she is totally confident in our boy's survival skills and believes Joan will always come back. At the supermarket, the two of them open the locks and lift the shutter, exposing an untouched stash of valuable items for them to loot. It's a miracle to find a supermarket like this in an apocalypse, with so much to use. Joan and W are sure the family can survive, live easily for a few years with so much stuff. They start collecting what they need, and the scene changes to the NBS headquarters. Here, a worried man is talking to someone on the phone. Unfortunately, he's stuck handling the daily broadcast, and has to follow strict instructions. Suddenly, he hears a sudden message from the other side that gives him important information. When the call ends, the guy is left questioning the purpose behind the messages being broadcast. Among his jotted down thoughts, he has recently learned of a motorcyclist whose identity is unknown to him. Johan and W acquired what they needed most. They also took this opportunity to take a good amount of medicine from the pharmacy. Suddenly, W feels the weight of robbing stores, but it's too late to worry about unimportant things like that when the world is destroyed. Since looting the store is going to take a while, Johan stays on guard, especially since the medicines need to be carefully checked before being taken. The NBS headquarters is just ahead, and Johan is busy looking at it. He remembers the broadcast was from the same radio, which means Gina was right about it being nearby. W thinks it wouldn't be wise to worry about the broadcast right now, especially since they have to take care of Gina's family first and concentrate on finding his sister. W tells him to just leave it for now and focus on more pertinent matters. Though reluctant, Johan understands that he has to find his sister as soon as possible, especially since she stopped replying to his messages. Flashing back to Gina's family, they share an excellent meal, revitalizing themselves after being completely exhausted for 2 days. The family is so grateful that he has done so much for them. All of this should last the 4 of them at least 6 months. Unfortunately, he won't be staying, as he has to go look for his sister. Gina's family is worried and her mother asks him about his sister's location, but since Johan's sister lives very far away, so it's not going to be easy. Joan understands, but he has to save the only family he has left. Hearing this, Hina becomes silent, understanding his pain. He has one more request though. After saving his sister, our boy wants to bring her back to Hina's family, which makes her nervous. Joan firmly believes that this is the safest place of all, and it's not like his sister has important connections to worry about in these times. Since the zombies can't bite him, he'll be of great use to them. Anyway, he just wants to make sure Hina is safe and is willing to do whatever it takes. That's why he promises to return with his sister and help them even more. Of course, Hina's family can't refuse such a request, but they have a strong objection. Hina's father is throwing a tantrum because he thinks our boy wants to steal his daughter. Even the mother notices, but she is more supportive than anything. They can't believe they're thinking about grandchildren when they're in the middle of a damn apocalypse. At night, they have to make do with candles, since there's no electricity. Joan finds out that Hina's parents are already fast asleep, so they continue their late-night talks. W, calculating his thoughts, wonders how much food they'll need to take to get to Yanyan, considering there are 2 of them. Hearing that, Joan looks confused, especially when the journalist admits he will go with them to help. Our boy finds it a ridiculous idea to leave a safe place like this, but W understands the risks. It's just that he has always been part of risky jobs and is dying to know more about Joan, which is why he sticks to him like a persistent plague. The guy is going to use him to make a name for himself, but it really makes me laugh, because it's not like anyone cares about fame in a zombie apocalypse, right? W reminds him of Joan's own words, who bravely said he would trust the journalist's words from now on. Promising not to be a burden, the journalist assures him that everything will be fine. Besides, since he has traveled a lot as a journalist, he knows all the ways to manage safe navigation. Joan is okay with that, so Hina gives them the last thing to accompany them on their journey is the radio he picked up from the building. It'll be useful for learning about new information in the area. Although Go is a bit skeptical about it, Johan is surprised when the radio suddenly turns on and airs a new broadcast. The broadcast talks about reports confirmed by several witnesses in the area. The focus is on a man who is immune to the undead living, someone famous called the Motorcycle Man. As the broadcast goes on, Wu quickly realizes the radio is probably talking about our boy. The reporter continues talking about this mysterious motorcycle man who was first seen in Incheon, then in Wingango and Haut. They all say this man is heading straight for the heart of Seoul. That's the guy who isn't affected by the infected. Maybe he is the solution to all their problems. Clinging to hope in the middle of all this chaos, the MBS radio show begins at noon. Meanwhile, Johan, sitting next to Blondie on the couch, seems surprised, as if he didn't expect to hear that. Janelle goes on to say that a man who isn't affected at all, if attacked by the infected, that news isn't something he believed at first. And who would broadcast that garbage? He says he's received complaints telling him not to give people false hope, but even though he's trapped in that radio studio, he pushes on just to send out even the smallest spark of hope to the survivors listening, to those trapped in the endless cycle of despair and loneliness. He wants to let them know that giving up is not an option. He has faith that hope will never die, and that salvation will arrive. This is the NBS radio show, broadcasting live. I'm Janelle. The trio listening to Janelle is completely astonished by all of this. Meanwhile, Janelle puts on a track to lighten the mood, a soothing song for the hearts grieving and exhausted from all the despair. With that, he hits play and lets the song flow out to the countless souls trapped in the depths of despair. Slumped over like a dead weight, Janelle looks completely exhausted, even after preaching hope over the radio. He seems to believe it himself, with the worrying reality that he has no idea how much longer he can go on with this life. Back at the house, the trio is just standing there, completely silent. No one has said a word in minutes. Then, W breaks the silence, confirming if the guy's name is Sun Jinel. So, Joan asks if W knows the guy. Rummaging through his pocket, Gu mutters to himself about finding Janelle's number somewhere. Finally, he finds it, so he definitely met the guy at the radio's current affairs department. The surprising thing is, he starts to think Janelle might be running the entire station by himself. Aside from that, Joan asks Gu if the radio station is still getting reports for the broadcast. W is sure they're still getting them, no doubt. After taking all this in, Joan finally speaks up, ready to declare that he's the guy on the motorcycle. This huge confession leaves everyone speechless. Without a doubt, he openly admits that, in reality, zombies don't bite him, but he still has no idea why. Despite everything, Joan, with a serious expression, didn't want to give people false hope. He feels like he doesn't deserve to pull this stunt. However, Gu tries to see his point, but suggests he be careful about something that could put his life in danger, especially when living in a world where trusting anyone is a fool's errand. From W's point of view, if this guy exposes his identity, he's completely screwed. But Joan feels that things like that don't really matter now. Flashing a smile, he says outright that exposing his identity isn't a big deal, especially in a world like this. Still, he tells them to relax, vowing that he'll be as careful as possible so there's nothing to worry about. He sighs out loud, and W gives him the green light, finally letting him do his thing. Then, W decides to connect Joan with that guy from the broadcast after all. He's somewhat close to the PD personally. Besides, he's sure the PD will only buy his story if he vouches for Joan. Because of this, Joan is truly grateful to W for his unconditional support so far. Calling the MBS station, Sun Janelle, W introduces himself as Kim W, asking if he's in the middle of the broadcast. Janelle can't believe it. What he's hearing when he hears the journalist's voice, who, relieved, asks if Gu is in a safe place now. Gu admits that he is in a safe situation, but quickly deflects to the real issue. That's when he confesses that he has information that needs to be reported. Without wasting time, Gu drops a huge lead, saying that the motorcycle guy from the broadcast might be his colleague. As he drops this, Wu and Joan look at each other for a moment, but Janelle practically jumps out of his seat. The guy can't handle this bombshell, asking if he's really telling the truth. Then, he shudders upon receiving this grave news, trembling like a leaf, struggling to process it all. Regaining control, Janelle rushes to the radio system, apologizes to the audience, stating that he has received an important tip. With urgency, he decides to cut the broadcast short with this one last song. Back on the call, Janelle can only hope that Gu's words of wisdom are true, with reports about the motorcycle guy coming in from time to time, with much uncertainty, some news being true, others just rumors. When asked, Wu doesn't hesitate for even a second. He's ready to put his name on it, as any true journalist would. This takes Janelle by surprise, whose eyes widen in amazement. Flashing back, Wu, fighting through the crowd, calls out the sad-looking president about his unfair appointment. Wu demands an explanation from the president. In his journalist days, Wu, shivering from the cold, waited for an explanation but never got the chance. Now, Janelle is ready to believe Wu's truth, confirming if his colleague is still with him. That said, Wu signals to Joan, and he joins the call, claiming to be the guy on the motorcycle. This simple voice leaves Janelle stunned for a moment. Keeping his cool, he has his list of prepared questions that need answers. Meanwhile, from all corners of the world, RJ listeners hear Janelle say that the motorcycle guy really holds great significance for his listeners. He knows everyone has fallen into the pit of despair, and for them, just knowing that there's someone out there who can't be bitten by the infected, that, in itself, is their last shred of hope. Without further ado, Janelle asks Joan if all of this is true, and that's when he confesses verbally that he is immune to the infected. However, the reason remains unknown. Furthermore, he continues by saying that the infected don't seem to notice him at all, they don't get aggressive, and they barely react to his voice, as if he's not even there. Janelle jots it all down. After a sudden pause, Joan says that he's not yet the kind of hope Janelle is looking for. Yes, he has helped a few people with this ability, but he also has his own limits. That's all. Janelle decides to only pass on the verified information, even though Go has vouched for Joan. Moreover, he demands to see proof demonstrating his immunity to the infected. Joan asks Janelle if the area around MBS is crawling with infected, which sends a chill down Janelle's spine. Joan confirms that he himself is going there that very night. Janelle finds it hard to believe Joan's bold claims. Janelle demands to know if he will really dare to come alone, to which Joan, fearless and with eyes full of determination, declares that this is the only condition to make him believe his story. So, he is willing to take the risk for it. This is enough to spook Janelle, but his RJ protocol won't allow him to pass on the information without verification. Therefore, he expects Joan to arrive at MBS, since it wouldn't matter to him if the infected do nothing to him. He then tells Janelle where he is currently located. At the MBS broadcasting station, on the 8th floor, in the second studio, at the end of the right hallway. Janelle warns this immunity claimant that their station is practically overrun by the infected mob. However, Joan, unfazed, sets their meeting time for tomorrow, as this guy doesn't care at all. After this, Janelle addresses reporter W, saying he never imagined hearing his voice in times like these, so he wishes him to take good care. W assures him that they will find him soon, and so the call ends. The infected's radar doesn't detect Joan at all, not to mention that he is completely immune to their chaos and they won't bite him no matter what. All this information seems hard to process, for this guy. But Janelle's mind wonders what if all of this were true. Letting everything settle in, Janelle realizes that Johan isn't just hope, but he could be salvation itself. The next day, Johan's preparation is complete. He tells Wu that it's clear outside, bright as day, and there isn't a single zombie near their car. Getting ready, H is practically set for this heist. Just then, Ina's mother comes down to give Johan some homemade rice balls. She believes it's going to be a tough journey, so it's good to have something to eat. The guy practically jumps with excitement upon noticing a pile of packed rice balls in the box for him. After thanking her a bunch, he promises to eat them all. Thus, this woman warns Johan to be very careful and to return with her sister in one piece, because they will definitely be waiting for them. Just as Johan heads out, Hina runs up to get his attention. Lost for words, she can't look him in the eye. He assures the blonde that there's nothing to worry about, as the zombies wouldn't dare mess with him. However, her emotions overflow and, before she knows it, she's hugging him tightly, which takes Johan by surprise. But this cute girl couldn't help but thank Johan for everything, though she wants this guy to come back at all costs. Turning as red as a tomato, Johan tells her not to worry, as he fully intends to return safe and sound. Suddenly, Wu feels the awkwardness, rejecting this union. The guy rants that dating is fine, but getting married shouldn't be so rushed, feeling an aversion. After this, Johan leaves, while the people behind await his safe return. Hours later, Johan and Wu arrive at the dangerous, zombie-filled zone. With Wu secured and packed in the car, the immunized Johan, bat in hand, takes good swings at those brainless zombies. A wild hit attracts the attention of other zombies who can't help but stare and take a closer look. Johan speculates that if they don't take down this horde, this whole area will become a headache. Not only that, he believes it will become much more dangerous to find shelter in this chaos. Wu understands where he's coming from. Joan is willing to let him handle this situation. Although Joan, with a sigh, knows it's no easy task, but he has no other choice. Clutching his bat, this big guy warns the brainless army that he must get through at all costs. Inside MBS, Janelle is about to pass out from extreme weakness. Slumped in a corner, he feels his body collapsing. Whatever strength he has left, he thinks he has reached his limit. If this keeps up, his life will be over. He has nothing to drink or eat, his electrolytes were depleted long ago, so he resorts to waiting for his death. Judging by his health, today's broadcast doesn't seem to be a possibility. Still, he feels even worse for not having left a farewell message on yesterday's show. Janelle anticipated this could happen, but he would have a lasting regret. He still wishes to confirm the truth behind the motorcycle man, feeling dizzy as if he were one step from heaven. Janelle thinks it's a damn shame to go without satisfying his curiosity. Suddenly, just then, his phone flashes with a call that catches his attention. It turns out to be his fellow reporter, King W. Wasting no time, he grabs the phone to answer quickly. Just like that, a concerned voice comes over the speaker as W demands to know if Janelle is okay. And so, finally, W gets an answer when Janelle confirms he's all right for now. He sighs in relief and tells him to hang on, as they surely won't be that long. This comment piques his curiosity and also sends a shiver down his spine. Firing off questions like crazy, he asks W directly about his current whereabouts. Without further ado, W informs him that they have successfully reached the MBS building. Suddenly, Ginal's soul probably leaped out of his skin. He can't believe those fools actually made it to the MBS building. Still, he warns the fools that the entrance is infested with zombies, making it impossible for anyone to pass. To calm his mind, W starts a video call with Ginal. Just as W connects him, Janelle's mind is blown as he witnesses the atrocious acts of the motorcycle man clearing the zombies away. He realizes the infected are being battered and crushed by a bat just to clear a path to the entrance. That man alone is forcing a path to exterminate them all. W explains that if he stepped out, he'd be a second away from death, but in Joan's case, the guy is cut from a different cloth. W witnesses the man on the motorcycle, true to his word, see the first guy who isn't the zombies' favorite meal. They don't bite him, which makes him the face of hope. After finishing them off, Joan zones out, flooded by endless thoughts. All of this occupies his mind, haunted by the trauma of having killed countless people. After a brief pause, he gives the all clear to W, saying that it's now safe to come out. W then emerges, believing it's all real, so he stays true to his wise words. To set the record straight, he states that the broadcast station would still be a living hell if someone like Joan hadn't stepped up to intervene. Only he had the opportunity to enter the MBS building. Just then, Joan spots a police shield lying uselessly on the ground. He hands the shield to W, saying that it will definitely come in handy. W agrees, feeling the same. Moving on, Joan is sure they will run into many more mindless zombies inside, so he gives W some advice. He tells him his best chance of survival is to stick close to him, that way he won't have a problem seeing another day. W recalls that the inside of the MBS building is nothing more than a maze for newbies, but thanks to W's familiarity with the place, he'll be the guide who knows the layout of the broadcasting station, so he offers to be his navigator on this mission. And so, these two brave fools venture into the building. Walking inside, the place is practically empty. Joan, with his baseball bat as his weapon of choice, checks another room, but turns away seeing no survivors or zombies. This surprises W, but he feels that something is off. As they go upstairs, W gets an unsettling feeling in his chest, forcing him to stay on high alert, turning his head every second. The guy mutters that this kind of silence just doesn't feel right. and then he asks Joan if everyone just left when the incident occurred. At first, Joan's mind races with countless thoughts to find a reason for it. However, he ends up formulating a question instead. Without missing, Joan asks W why Janelle is so determined to keep the show going, even though he has a feeling that, regardless of his situation, all of this must be really difficult for him, but still, why must he keep broadcasting? Thinking about it, W probably believes it's his sense of responsibility as an informant. After all his years working at the broadcasting station, he continued to provide all kinds of information, even in these desperate times. W believes that Janelle wants to continue doing what he can as a duty to humanity. Joan thinks the work that W and Janelle do as journalists is truly impressive, which surprises W. How a couple of journalists didn't seem to lose their sense of duty and continued gathering information to try to understand this situation and, in many ways, were probably trying to solve it. On top of that, Joan feels that there's nothing he can really do as an undertaker, which makes him feel somewhat pathetic. Just then, W hits him with the shield, which nearly makes his eyes pop out. Joan asks W, "What gives?" But W states that this hit is on behalf of Janelle. He believes Janelle would have done the same if he had seen Joan moping with his loser attitude. Without a doubt, W poses a question to Joan. Who is the person that can exist comfortably in this world without worrying too much? Cutting to the chase, W blurts out that Joan has a million opportunities to find his way out and that he can put his mind to anything. Even so, he chose to save Hina, himself, and his family. Now, W points out that Joan is doing everything he can to save Janelle too, and that's something only Joan has the power to do. But the real reason behind it is something else entirely. That said, W insists that it's a choice he made because it's the right thing to do. Besides, this world reeks of malicious people, not just survivors, and the guys who messed with Hina at the gas station serve as one example. But even in this corrupt world, Joan steps in to help out of pure goodwill. What's so pathetic about that? And W guarantees that no one else in the world has done what Joan has done so far. That does the trick. And Joan thanks W for this support as they arrive on the 8th floor. These two fools are ready for the showdown. Carefully, they head into the silent hallway, which, luckily, is also empty. At the end of the hall, at the second door, they finally reach the entrance to Studio 6. Gu plans to call for Janelle, unaware of what's about to happen to him. In just a few seconds, a hungry infected leaps into action to take a good bite out of W. As he turns his head, W panics, his soul nearly jumping out of his body from the terror. Just in time, Joan grabs him and pulls him away, and the guy is sent flying like a missile, but to his bad luck, the zombie bites the wrong guy. Worry takes over W, who desperately screams for Joan, who has just been bitten by the zombie. At that moment, Joan throws a brutal punch to knock the zombie away. But, at the end of his patience, the guy can't believe he's been bitten by the infected. W practically loses his mind at that moment, and Joan has no idea what's about to happen. He wonders if he's going to change too. He then asks Gu if he still has the gun with him. Gu's composure levels plummeted, drenched in sweat, unable to grasp the grave circumstances. Joan hopes he's still carrying it. Gu went from zero to existential dread pretty quickly. The guy took forever to process what Joan was implying. Sweating like crazy, he demands to know what Joan has in mind. However, Joan is in a hurry to get this over with. Upon entering Studio 6, he finds the same zombie he knocked down moments earlier. Trembling at the sight of this horrible scene, he refuses to sink so low and be like them. That's why he decides to fight his hardest until he loses his mind. Meanwhile, the woman, practically shaking like a leaf, recovers from the zombie fever and begs Joan to stop. That was not part of the plan. Joan's eyes widen, surprised to see a zombie changing back into its human form. Joan is faced with this anomaly while Gu watches from outside the room, crying his eyes out. She begs Joan to save her, insisting she's done nothing wrong. Completely bewildered, Gu wonders if she's really infected or not. However, Joan can't ignore the fact that she lunged at him to attack and bite him. If she's not infected, why did she bite his hand? In the brief silence, the room fills with the woman's sobs. That's when Joan decides to get her out of that dangerous place and take her to the studio. At first, the sight gave W a chill of terror, paralyzing him with fear, as Joan decided to take the biter with them. He reasons with the coward that she isn't infected, so they can't just leave her there to rot. He makes the decision to rethink it after they get somewhere much safer. While processing this absurd idea, W notices Joan's bitten hand and finds something strange. It turns out the wound healed in a matter of seconds. This shocking revelation hits him like a ton of bricks. On the other hand, Janelle, probably near lifeless or running on his last reserves, lies in the corner waiting for his rescuers. He's pretty sure he hears something nearby, making him wonder what's going on. That's when W's call alert startles him, so he answers immediately, asking if everything is okay. W correctly confirms Janelle's location in Studio 6. Without further ado, W tells Janelle to open the door, as he's right at the entrance. Utterly bewildered, Janelle wonders if W is really there, and if the area around him is secure. W nods, and quickly says there are no infected nearby. As he starts to open the door, W glances back at Joan, comforting the formerly infected woman. Jinal and the ex-zombie devour Jinal's homemade onigiri, as if they haven't eaten in 3 days. Meanwhile, W pays his respects to Janelle for keeping the show running for a whole week by himself. Witnessing the ravenous hunger, Joan tells the guys to calm down, as there's enough for everyone. Janelle mentions that he found some food there, so he's full for now. He compares his situation to the woman who spent a whole week starving, and he realizes he's in a much better position, eating like a maniac and drinking water at a much faster rate. She finally takes a deep breath and, at that moment, thanks her heroes for saving her life. She has no idea how to repay them. Joan plays it down, and W confirms her name is Choi Suhan when he tempts her. When asked, Suhan admits she worked at a shopping mall. It turns out Suhan was heading to MD for a broadcast sponsorship, when suddenly everything went wrong. In the hallway, out of nowhere, screams filled the station, coming at her from all directions. Sensing something was wrong, she did her best to run, but luck wasn't on her side. She stumbled right into a horde of zombies that devoured her and dragged her into the darkness. Now, recalling it, tears well up in her eyes. As she calms down, they fall into a 2-minute silence. Breaking the silence, Janelle asks what's the first thing Suhan remembers after that. Thinking about it, she says she heard 2 voices, which instantly startles Joan and W. At first, she says it was gradually growing, followed by the taste of blood. Despair takes over her, even though she felt strangely strong. As she recalls, the memory is still so vivid in her mind, as if it had just happened. Seeing that these hungry people hadn't had a moment to breathe, Joan decided to continue this conversation in a better place. For now, they let the woman have a much-needed rest. Afterward, Janelle was completely fascinated to discover that this woman was actually a former zombie. W confirms that she leaped to attack him, but ended up fighting Joan instead, only to transform back into a human. Not only that, but Joan's arm, which took the full force of the bite, didn't get infected, and of course, the wound healed as if it had never been there. Janelle completely accepts it, without needing an evidence report, or anything. After seeing Joan's unnatural immunity to zombies, nothing else can surprise him. Rather, this whole situation makes him think of a new hypothesis, as the true cause of the crisis has yet to be revealed. Even the government couldn't keep up, and martial law proved to be completely useless. Janelle thinks about the possibility of it being an airborne virus that turns people into zombies. W tends to ask why they haven't been affected. To counter this question, Janelle paints a pretty clear picture that they are primary bodies, immune with resistance to transmitted infections. That's why this whole theory baffles them, because even if their immunity only works against airborne infections, easy transmission through blood or saliva, like in a bite, could still turn them into zombies. In the main character's case, he confirmed the theory of complete body immunity, making John the safest guy in the world. So when Susan tasted John's blood, during the bite, it somehow turned her back into a human. This explanation now points directly to John. Gina declares that John might not just be completely immune, but a living vaccine. John stands still, trying to process what he just heard. The idea of being a vaccine seems impossible, but everything that has happened makes him reconsider. His mind keeps replaying the events that led to this moment, searching for an explanation. Afterward, Gina, who has been carefully observing the situation, explains that it's just a theory. However, based on what they've seen, it's the one that makes the most sense. W steps in, suggesting they take their time and think things through. The situation is complicated, and rushing to conclusions won't help. Reviewing everything properly is the only way to understand what's happening. Then, they recall the moment when Susan, already turned into a zombie, bit John. According to all known rules of the infection, he should have also transformed. However, there he is, completely immune. John's blood could be the cure to stop the infection. The idea seems impossible, but given the situation, it can't be ignored. Normally, a virus shouldn't be neutralized so quickly, but the results speak for themselves. If this theory is correct, it would also explain why the infected never attacked him. It's not just about immunity. His blood itself acts as a vaccine. Even the smallest amount is enough to reverse the infection. This means John isn't just resistant to the virus, but he might be the only person capable of stopping it. His blood could hold the cure the world desperately needs. If the infected can really be cured, then his parents weren't. Completely lost. That means they were still human, and there was a chance to save them. This thought is shocking, and John starts to rethink everything he's done since he woke up, and even while traveling there, he's defeated so many infected without stopping to think. Also, it occurs to him that he wasn't just trying to survive, but that he had been ending lives that could have been saved. Wu reminds him that he has kept many others safe, and that there's no other way. Surviving means making tough decisions, no matter how difficult they may be. Since it all began, he has met all kinds of people, some worse than the infected. Not all monsters are zombies. Some are humans who lose their kindness, proving that the real danger isn't just the virus, but people themselves. No one can judge John for his actions because he has never harmed anyone and instead protects them. Rather than just arguing, they decide to confirm the truth. A suggestion arises to test what John is capable of, and the best way to do it is to make his presence known. They plan to feature him on a radio broadcast that night. This will reveal if he truly holds the key to a cure or if there's something else behind his existence. John feels unsure about the idea of being on a live broadcast. The idea of speaking to so many people makes him hesitate. Later, he connects with Hina on a video call and explains his situation, how they want him to speak on the radio. He's afraid he isn't as special as they think, and he's worried about creating false hope. However, Hina reassures him that in this world, no one is more remarkable than him. Afterward, she suggests that John's sister might be listening to the broadcast, encouraging him to do his best. He appreciates the support and thanks her. Realizing he needs to save his battery, he promises to talk more later, but before hanging up, he asks Hina to send his regards to her parents. After the call, Sujin makes a joke, asking him if that was his girlfriend, which he quickly denies. But the other person isn't convinced, pointing out that it sounded like she thinks he's really special. Then Wu joins in, making him feel even more embarrassed, and jokes to Joan that even Hina's parents already think they are a couple, so there's no point in denying it anymore. But suddenly, Janelle bursts into the room and asks Joan if he has rested, mentioning that everything is ready and it's time to prepare. But Joan hesitates, worried about making mistakes during the live broadcast. However, he reassures him, saying that mistakes don't matter as much in times like these. Afterwards, the radio host, Son Janelle, begins the broadcast, acknowledging the numerous messages of support and concern from listeners. Despite the scarcity of data and electricity, people are still taking the time to communicate, and he expresses his gratitude for their kindness. To return the favor, he announces a special guest, the first in the history of the show. He introduces the person everyone has been most curious to meet, the one who has given people hope in these dark times, the mysterious figure known as the Motorcycle Man, Khan Joan, finally on the air. Afterwards, the host asks the protagonist to introduce himself to the listeners. Joan is nervous but determined. He hesitates before speaking, mentions his name and age, revealing that he works as a mortician. Furthermore, the host mentions that many reports have been received about Joan, and although some details need to be verified, there is one question that stands out as the most important. He asks if it's true that the infected do not attack him. After a brief pause, Joan confirms that the reports are true and explains that the infected neither bite him nor attack him. They barely acknowledge his presence. Then, the host admits that it sounds incredible, and that it was hard for him to accept it at first. However, after seeing it himself on several occasions, he can no longer deny the truth. The host then mentions reports suggesting that Joan has been traveling east, and asks if he has a specific destination. Joan confirms that he does. He is heading to Yanyan in the province where his family is, with the hope of reuniting with them despite the dangers on the way. Afterwards, the host acknowledges that Yanyan is quite far, and wonders if there are any listeners there. Suddenly, a report comes in from a listener in Sao, a nearby area. An unexpected message captures everyone's attention. The host reveals that the caller also evacuated from Yanyan to Seoul. According to him, the army has already passed through Yanyan, leaving nothing behind. Joan processes the news, realizing that her journey might have been in vain, and that her family's fate remains uncertain. Joan tries to process the possibility that Yanyan could be completely destroyed. Yoon, equally alarmed, wonders if the army really destroyed the entire area. The host then steps in to clarify, explaining that, according to the available reports, the military did take action in Yanyan. However, the phrase "nothing left behind" is unclear. It could mean there are no survivors, or it could just refer to the infected being eliminated. The uncertainty leaves Joan anxious, not knowing if her family is still alive or if she's been chasing a lost cause. Then, the host emphasizes the need to verify the claims before jumping to conclusions. Any additional details about the situation in Yanyan would help clarify what really happened. The producer confirms that the army acted when the crisis broke out, immediately declaring martial law. However, after that initial response, their movements have been limited. In fact, reports suggest they are rapidly pulling out of metropolitan areas, which has led to traffic restrictions and even more disorder. However, the case of Yanyan might be different, suggesting something unusual happened there compared to the rest of the country. The host suggests that the army might have evacuated the survivors from Yanyan, placing them in a safer situation. Furthermore, he encourages Joan to hold on to hope. Afterwards, Joan reflects on her sister's love for the radio. Since their childhood, they always listened to it together, finding comfort in its presence. She believed it made their quiet home feel more alive and less lonely. If she is safe, there is no doubt she is listening to this broadcast right now, just as she always did before everything changed. Joan remains determined, stating that no matter what happened to Yanyan, it doesn't change her goal, and she is going there to find her sister. Besides, if she is listening to the broadcast, wants her to stay strong and hold on a little longer, promising he'll come for her no matter what. The host acknowledges Joan's resolve and thanks him for his efforts. After the broadcast, the host shares that many listeners have sent messages of support, thanking Joan for giving them courage. Afterward, W teases him, saying he was nervous at first but quickly adjusted, joking that maybe he chose the wrong career. Joan quickly denies it, to which Go advises him to get used to broadcasts, because once things calm down, the media will want to interview him. He could even become a global star. Later, the woman hesitates before asking a question, but the host encourages her to speak. She wonders why he didn't mention his cure during the broadcast, believing it could have given hope to the listeners. The host admits he left it out for Joan's sake. If people knew his blood could cure the infected, they might see him only as a hero or a savior. Although that sounds ideal, things might not be so simple, because the weight of something like that could bring unexpected consequences, some that Joan might not be ready to face. Furthermore, the host explains that if the truth about Joan's blood gets out, he might not be seen just as a hero, but as a resource. Under the guise of helping humanity, he could end up being nothing more than a test subject, which is why Janelle tells the protagonist that it's best to keep this a secret, since with the current situation, trusting the army or the government isn't an option. The priority should be rescuing his sister. Joan understands, and decides to inspect the radio station more thoroughly. Before leaving, W hands him a clean gun. Afterward, Joan hesitates, wondering if he really needs the gun for a quick look around, but Go insists, telling him he should take it just in case. He understands Joan's feelings, but warns him not to let his guard down. The more he does, the more vulnerable he will become. Right now, he has every right to be selfish until he saves his sister. Joan takes the advice to heart and thanks him before heading out, determined to continue his search. Go is surprised by this statement, because it explains that Johan is kind, but lacks strong determination. At only 28 years old, he still has many challenges ahead of him. While his kindness is a strength, it can also be a weakness in a world like this. Besides, a gentle heart can break long before the body, which is why the presence of W is so important. Whenever Johan starts to lose hope, W is the one who helps him keep going. Afterward, the host agrees that Johan only grows stronger thanks to the support around him. Without help, reaching Yanyan would be impossible. To which W doesn't hesitate to say he will assist Johan, not just because it's an important story, but also because he once helped him. Sujin, who is nearby, hesitates before speaking up. W confirms that he is traveling with Johan, at which point the woman expresses her interest in joining them. W didn't expect this request and is surprised by the sudden decision. Then, W hesitates for a moment before responding to Sujin's request. Traveling together isn't a simple decision, and he asks if she has any personal connection to Yanyan, to which Sujin explains that she was shocked when she heard about Yanyan's situation on the radio. The military unit that passed through the area isn't just any group to her. Her father is the commander of the 4th Armored Brigade, which was stationed there. Before continuing with the story, let's take a look at our guy's past. There, we see an elderly woman who is named Elle. At this moment, she feels guilty for accepting the help and money that Johan's sister is willing to offer her, but Johan's sister gently reassures her, telling her she isn't a burden, just a small act of kindness. She hopes this woman will enjoy a good meal with her grandchildren, and that skipping meals won't be an option. She thanks her endlessly for this. A few moments later, since he is having a hard time paying for lunch, Johan asks his sister why she gave the money away. She brushes it off, saying she has enough money to buy the old woman lunch. She also mentions that she comes up this hill every week or so to collect trash and paper. Even though it's somewhat pointless, she does it anyway. That's what she calls a sense of true, unseen kindness, the very reasons that hold humanity together. This leads her to dream that one day Joan will carry that same kindness forward, so she asks if he will. They finish their trip down memory lane, alone on a bench, lost in thoughts of the past. Joan looks at his last messages to his older sister. With accumulated sadness, later on, W asks him if Mugen's father is the deputy commander of the 4th Armored Brigade Zin, who is Colonel Choi Yunel, previously stationed in Charon, but reassigned to Yanyan last year. Moreover, his family moved to Yanyan, but she stayed in Seoul for work. W considers that her whole world turned 180 degrees in just 1 week, without any warning. Furthermore, he thinks this woman feels a sense of security with Joan and probably wants to accompany them. Just then, his mind shifts. Colonel Choi Yunel. The name sounds familiar. He served in Charon until last year. Something clicks in his mind. Meanwhile, Janelle thinks about letting Sujin accompany them, which isn't so bad, considering the army is taking control of Yanyan. He believes that it will probably be the 4th Armored Brigade's unit, and that unit is definitely blockading the area. Civilians aren't allowed entry, but, in Mugan's case, this civilian has direct ties to the deputy commander's executive family, which changes the whole story. Not only that, Hino concludes that there's no safe place, except for the military base in times like these. Even knowing that the road to Yanyan isn't easy, requiring immense planning to get around the horde of infected, it could take longer than expected. However, the option to leave still sounds better than staying behind and doing nothing. Sujin breaks the silence, expressing her desire to reunite with her family, so they decide to discuss the matter further once Joan returns. Continuing on, Joan hears Sujin's case and asks if she is coming with them. He has no problem with her joining, knowing that her family is in Yanyan. Gu gives Joan a dose of reality, telling him that they aren't going to Yanyan on vacation, as he swallows rice balls. Joan knows the risks are real, but in times like these, family is. First, he also casually mentions that he's traveling to Yanyan for his sister, something Sujin finds relatable, hoping not to be a burden to them later on. Later, they ask Janelle what's next. He says that, now that he has some hope, he's going to continue broadcasting from there. With that in mind, he asks if they can share any information they gather on the way to Yanyan. Additionally, Janelle mentions that he receives reports from all over the country, but information about military bases is rare. Also, almost no one is making long-distance trips like them. Janelle points out that places like Seoul and the metropolitan area are practically shut down. He believes that if the military or the government are still functioning, they've likely moved their bases to the provinces. That's why Janelle thinks broadcasting their journey to Yanyan as a live documentary would mean a lot to his surviving listeners. He hopes that Joan can rescue his sister and reunite with her. Meanwhile, he plans to stay behind and do his part. Joan gives him a slight smile, promising to come back for him later. Wari packs at least 1 month's worth of food supplies for Joan. Janelle worries that it's risky to give him their supplies before they head to Yanyan, but Wari reassures him, telling him they'll stop by a supermarket to restock. Besides, Joan confirms that the 8th floor is clear of zombies, so they're no longer trapped. Janelle thanks Joan for saving him in more ways than one. He dreams of the day they can broadcast together again, and next time, also, with his sister. Putting their hands together, they wish each other good luck before parting ways. After that, Janelle watches as the trio drives away, leaving him with nothing but hope. Once the boy and his friends are gone, he starts his motorcycle, leading the way, while Wari and Sujin get settled in the car. With their engines roaring to life, they hit the road, with Wari staying close, following Joan's lead. They vow to bring Lee back this time. With the door jammed by a pile of trash, Lee's daughter sleeps peacefully. She gently whispers for her to hold on a little longer, telling her that Uncle Joan is coming to rescue them soon. Meanwhile, our trio's journey is interrupted when they find the road completely jammed with the wreckage of abandoned cars. Even if they try, they can't even get the bike through all the junk blocking their path. Guya had hoped that his journey to Yanyan wouldn't be a walk in the park, but he hadn't anticipated this much trash. As for him, they might have to take a much longer detour than he initially thought. Sujin takes a look at the map in her hands and suggests taking Route 86. She's sure they won't find this level of destruction there. W considers her idea viable, so he quickly informs Joan about the national highway they're about to take, but it seems Joan's mind is already occupied with troubling thoughts. The sight of a dead family in front of him makes his heart sink, but he shakes off the feeling and replies to his friend. A while later, they arrive at Namyangju Station, where they encounter a few zombies that the trio easily takes down with their combined efforts. Afterward, they sit down to prepare some food. Night falls, and they take shelter in their car. Joan looks at his phone. He has already sent countless messages to his sister, but he still hasn't received a reply. Morning comes, and the path they were following leads them to a dead end. There are many paths they could take, but finding one that actually leads them to Yanyan is a completely different problem. Filtering for a safer route is even more complicated. Finally, they decide to take a short break here before continuing. The place is quite secluded and quiet, so it shouldn't be too risky. After all, they have been exhausting themselves trying to find the safest route, so a short break to recharge is more than deserved. Sujin takes the opportunity to go into the thick woods to do her business. As she disappears into the vegetation, W isn't sure if she should be wandering around there alone, but on the other hand, they can't exactly follow her. All they can do is hope she stays safe, since the direction she took only leads to an abandoned mountain. Still, it must not be easy for a woman to keep up with them, especially since they've been rushing without rest or time to regroup. She must be exhausted, trying not to slow him down. She's clearly exhausted from being the only woman with them, but at the end of the day, she can't complain, since she was the one who insisted on joining them. If only she could ask Joan to stand guard while she does her business. But that's not an option. Her worst fear comes true when a man armed from head to toe appears behind her, the barrel of his gun pointing directly at her.